Thank you, Dave.
Let's go.
You learn a lot, especially during these times. And then when it becomes like more people or other people or other clients here, the problem solving.
I'm good at problem solving most of the time.
You are. You really are.
It's kind of my thing. That's why I wanted to go to law school.
Yeah?
Yeah. I was accepted to law school once, applied 3 times.
You applied 3 times.
Yeah. Well, my test scores were really shitty. And so...
I was a terrible test taker. It was more just because I had to study really hard. And when I think about when me and my brother were growing up, we're so close in age that, you kind of have that like, their parents never mean to, but they kind of compete against like, oh, why aren't you more like this and better grades like that? And so my brother, he had an amazing memory. He has an amazing memory. So being compared to that, like him just being able to be like test take and he just memorized everything so easy. For me, I'm like studying for weeks for a test and hoping to get like an A- B+ on it, Wow. And so, I mean, it was like, it was daunting taking tests, but I was a really good studier. I learned how to study really well.
What's the difference between studying and having a really good memory for test taking like your brother, I wonder?
I don't know. I think that I just didn't retain it as well as he did. Personally, I think he had like a photographic memory. The kid could just read a book and just put it down and tell you. He was like Cliff Notes with a mouth.
Memory, that's a really... That's
Ew,
a great,
it's freaking
that's
me
a compliment.
out. He's amazing. That's why, gosh, the kid, he does, I don't think, I leave him to tell any of his tales, but his job is really cool and he's pretty popular at doing it. So I'm pretty happy for him. And it has a lot to do with memory and problem solving and things like that. So it's cool.
That's cool. Memory is an interesting thing. Do you know the science behind memory? You have 2 forms.
No, I don't know the science behind it.
So you have 2 forms of memory. You have a short-term memory and a long-term memory.
Got that.
It's sort of like a computer. They build computers around sort of the mental processing power and capacity, et cetera, that the human mind they operate similarly. So you have a short-term memory, which is like your processing capacity or your processing memory. And then you have a long-term memory, which is all those almost unconscious memories that you can file forward if you need to reflect on that in a minute or a moment, a second. And it's interesting because the processing capacity memory is, as I understand it anyway, I'm not a scientist, everybody. But
I think it's funny though, because we're always talking about things.
Yeah, right. Like we're scientists.
Yeah. Like if I was a scientist.
And you know exactly what happens whenever I leave here, right? I start Googling the shit out of these topics to find out if I'm actually
even
making
close.
any reference to something that's ever been posted.
But just to go further along on that note before we veer back, it's pretty funny because when you are close, you're like, yeah, babe, I was really close to that. I am smart.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm working on that smart thing.
High five. Sweet.
I don't know. So you have the short-term processing memory.
Right. And then you were telling me you had the long-term
and you
the
have a long-term memory.
subconscious where in a pressed second, which I really appreciated, you could, file something or pull something from the filing cabinet.
Yeah, that's the way that we learn and process things to make decisions.
Sure.
And is affected by a lot of things, external factors, how we're feeling, for example.
Sure.
Stress is the number 1 killer of brain size, brain processing power, and it's long-term damage actually, but that's really creepy topic because we're all stressed out these days. So the idea on that note, before we move on, is don't be stressed out because it has long-term effects on your memory capacity. And it has long-term...
That's really hard.
And it has long-term effects on your ability to process things quickly as well. It literally kills your brain.
I hear you.
It's unbelievable. So, yeah, don't stay stressed, people.
Oh my gosh.
But
I was like, you're so serious.
on another,
I mean, like, I think that's talking about stress. I just think that that's one of those things where we all understand that it's probably not good for us, but we don't know the brevity of it.
I think people should look into that and call me on my bullshit. But I think what they're going to find in the latest Harvard Medical Journal article, because I read the Harvard Medical Journal articles because my grandpappy used to do it and he would read them to me on the back porch. But I think it would be great for people to look this up further for their own benefit. And I think for us as well. And if you're not aware of it, I would like to share it, because these practices that we've talked about in the past of hypnosis and trying to find maybe a cleaner head, to be more present, it allows us to be happier, I think, in the moment and enjoy life in a happier way with less stress. And therefore, you're actually doing yourself a huge mental benefit in not being stressed all the time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
Because
I think
it kills
just kind of
memory.
takes over. Not only just kills the memory or the science behind it, but you can even just feel it. Like sometimes I feel it pounding or like wrenching and, well,
you move slower
in my body, and you
process things slower in the moment as well. And so what that does is you're basically in your mind firing on all cylinders, but this fight or flight thing happens at the same time, utilizing a part of your brain when you're stressed. It's just like if you're in a fight or flight mode, it pushes all of your sensory things, sensory emotions and feelings, and you start firing to fight or flight in that moment. And therefore, you're not using your long-term memory anymore. You're not bringing that into the forefront unless it involves your fight or flight instinct, which could be martial arts, weapons training, et cetera, which is really interesting about like how your brain capacity is used in a fight or flight scenario or in a high stress scenario, like you're juggling a lot of things and many different projects at work, and that stresses you out. People find that their processing capabilities, even to just clear out the sink at the end of the day, it seems like too much to figure out, because it all kind of, your memory and your processing capacity, which is directly related to memory, is bogged down. It's like having to reset your computer.
Or like, I don't even know how it happens, but like the way I handle stress or things like that would be exercise, meditation, just being outside, breathing my full breath of air, things like that. And so I don't know if it's the other chemical, kind of like the endorphin chemical, that kind of like counters that stress feeling.
Yes,
or
that's what's happening.
It's exact. So I'm just one of those things where that's how I get rid of it. And that's how I do my practices for stress relief. But I understand what you're saying, how it has everything to do with anything that goes on, whether it be how you're acting, how you're feeling, how your performance in your work, your productivity, things like that. Definitely. I find myself actually just recently feeling being pulled in so many different directions. And
we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, especially with work, having decided to do, a few new projects in my line of work that will cause me to have my attention in like 4 different spots. And so managing that is challenging and interesting at the same time. But I've been lucky. I have you, and I have such big support. So at least people are like at least helping me out with it as much as they can.
But it's a lot. You're taking on a lot right now, and you are being pulled in a lot of directions. It's a great example of what we're talking about, but you have good practice in your stress relief. Mm-hmm. You have good rigor in your stress relief practices is what I'm saying. And that's something that I think is really important to share with people, because I find myself truly inspired by the rigor in your practice there, because I need to integrate more of that rigor, as we've been talking.
You have to.
And so,
and you realize you have more time than you think, which is so interesting, because we're always saying we don't have time. And I feel like that also puts a stress on your mind. But then whenever I say, oh my God, it's already 1, I'm like, oh, okay, it's only 1. And I'll change that around, and just changing that thought kind of just a little bit releases that stress if I can't go for a run or anything like that. So.
And you're absolutely right, because the way you're feeling is and your emotion and the way that you feel is creating the chemical releases in your brain, which make you feel happiness or they make you feel stress.
Exactly.
So if you can learn to condition your body and your voice and your mind and your body, your behavior, if you will, to feel like this is a happy moment, the silver lining moments, right? Even in the hard stuff. It's really important for the long term of your mental health and processing capacity, as I understand it from, not just Harvard Medical Journal, but no, what's interesting about, and coming back a little bit to memory, we were talking about your brother and how he's got such a really good memory for test taking and stuff like that. It's two different types of, like you said, mental processing and what part of your brain you're using to process the same situation. That's why some people can fly right through an LSAT for law school, and it just makes sense to them because their brain works that way. And then you've got someone that's going to sit there and have to take it 3 times to even get close to the minimum acceptance score like I did.
Right.
And it's just the way the brain retains, but no, I think they say that the number is you have 200 trillion memories or thoughts. You have 200 trillion thoughts that your brain is processing every second. That's a lot of information. And
that's not even just it is your thoughts, but it's just like not like subconscious past thoughts. It's also thoughts of things happening in the moment.
But that's your current processing memory.
Yeah.
That's not even and so this is the really cool part, and you're exactly right. So you have all of these things happening, right?
Yeah.
But for you to tackle the current situation, even this conversation, even how you look away and come back because that's your nature whenever I say things, or when you're feeling something in this conversation, or maybe you're having a thought of something that's irrelevant to this because a car passed by or someone passed by. You're processing that in that second, and you're able to process that with 200 trillion data points basically per second, so that you can bring into the forefront how you manage that situation and juggle the multitasking that we're having a conversation in here as well.
I know, I never even thought about how it is multitasking, even just having a conversation right here.
Yes.
I never really even thought about that. You do. And now it's very aware.
Yeah.
And actually, when you're aware like that, it almost makes you better at paying attention.
Yeah. And this, I think, is super critical to the conversation that we're having, which is you're an artist. And when you're in the moment and you're focusing and you're in there and you're tattooing, you're in that moment and all those other variables go away. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
They don't go away, but mostly.
Yes. Especially if it's just me at the studio by myself and it's just me and my client tattooing. And I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. I was just about to let it roll out of my mouth by saying that, when they're face down, they can't talk.
Oh my God. You have such a potty mouth.
Well, I mean, no, I didn't mean it like potty that. Mind. I just mean that the fact is that when they can't speak and I'm totally 100% in the zone, I don't have to pay attention to the conversation that they might be having with me while trying to create art. That is where I find my best moments. Not saying that I don't love talking to my clients.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's because you're utilizing in that moment, you're firing on all cylinders. So you've sent the most possible signals and energy, and you have emotions associated with that creative process that in turn is like turbocharging or really putting the juice behind those thoughts and giving energy there. It's that literally creating creative juices in the brain and firing on all the cylinders for you to be able to create in that moment and be happy. Imagine that test taking was so fucking fun for you that it was like tattooing for you. And that's like your brother. That's how I imagine people like your brother. It's like this fun super game for them. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, play on words, but definitely I think that, it really is. It must be fun. To me, I don't understand it. But when you relate it that way and you describe it that way, I can attribute that. I can understand the feeling that I get from it as obviously a feeling that someone else receives doing whatever they do best. And so for my brother, it would be test taking. Yeah, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I
Good
hadn't
for
thought
him.
about that until
Good.
we just
That's amazing.
went through it.
That's like such a way to look at it. Because for me, I always try to describe it. And I don't know why I didn't just put two and two together, but you made it very easy for me to realize that we only have so many emotions or feelings that we all get, but they're all from different things that we receive them from. And so, obviously if I feel at peace or really, really creative, someone else feels that way, but maybe doing a different medium or something like that. So or something different. So it's really, really cool. I love that.
Man, it's such the human mind. I mean, we're just not even scratching the surface.
Oh my gosh.
We're, man, pretty impressive species.
Absolutely.
And this brain capacity thing, and what I think is just really, really cool is our ability to process. Sometimes it seems and feels, and there's so many articles and papers out there, if I remember back from college and books on it, there's so many articles and papers out there about having an unlimited memory and an unlimited processing capacity for the mind. And it's just not true. And proof of that is when you're stressed and you're being pulled in so many different directions, right? Mm-hmm. That your memory and your ability to function mentally is stunted, if you will.
Yeah.
You're tired. You get tired faster. Mm-hmm. You're waking up slower. Your processing capabilities the next day are slower. And I recommend that people, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but I recommend that people look at the studies on this because stress is a big factor in how fast the mind and the body deteriorate.
The word deteriorated just reminded me of like European cigarette packets because they're allowed to put those
Reminded
photos.
You of what now?
It reminds me of fucking European cigarette packages where they have like the dead baby on the fucking front. That's what that reminds me of. That's what deteriorate reminds me of. When you say deteriorate, it's a graphic word. That's the first thing that popped up into my head. Sick.
That is sick. And I get it. I get it. You mean that the word deteriorate is equally as sick and sickening to you, and it makes you feel the same way as a dead baby.
Please.
I'm sorry, as the same as a missing baby on a cigarette pack. Is it missing baby?
No, it's like it's a terrible act of what happens when you smoke. So it's telling you the causes
when you're
and
pregnant,
the consequences if you're pregnant or yes, it just so happened to be the one of if you're pregnant and you're smoking. Crazy. It's pretty graphic, but people still buy cigarettes.
I'm sorry to use the word deteriorate.
No, I'm just saying it's a good word because if I don't want to be stressed and that's what it brings me to that, obviously I don't want that in my life.
Yeah, so basically, I'm not trying to be negative. What I'm just trying to bring to the forefront of the conversation here is that don't stress, you guys.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
Keep the head cool and healthy and as happy as possible so that we can cruise it. This is something that's cool about learning also about the mind is it processes things when it's learning something new using its short-term memory, obviously because it's learning something new, but it's pulling in all of its historical memories from its long-term memory to make reference points to memorize the current learning. Do you understand my point?
You're losing me. Wait, what? Yeah, no.
So for example, you're learning to run.
Okay.
Running is a lot like walking. Walking is a long-term memory. It's something that's part of your long-term memory.
Okay.
Body function. Functioning, walking, running, grabbing something. These are long-term memories that you're recalling to go and reach for something. It's always there. It's all the time. It's a repetitive motion. It's ingrained in your long-term memory. That's an example of how your long-term memory is used in the concept of how your brain processes new learnings. So it takes old experiences, brings them to the current, into the forefront to learn a new process. Like, I don't know, let's say, what's the newest thing that you learned? Let's use an example.
Newest thing that I've learned recently, just anything?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. I learned really cool hand massages, actually. So I've been kind of doing a little bit of research on how to take care of your hands as an artist, just because I'm already noticing after 8 years of tattooing that my hands are feeling a little stiff these days. And so I have been just kind of reading up on how to, kind of give myself some good hand massages, or like what exercises I can do, or I don't know, just other practices during my work that I can do for my hands or my wrists in order to prevent any like long-term damage as much as possible. Anyway, I'm just doing it now because I'm starting to feel a little stiff. So I'm like, oh, I better get on top of this before it gets any worse.
So what you're telling me is you're trying to figure out the best way to train me on how to do hand massages.
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Got
I mean, I was hoping you would get there, but we're there.
It sounded all scientific when you were saying it, but all I could hear in my head is I'm reading up on how to teach Logan how to give me hand massages. That's basically what my interpretation was.
Spot on.
So you learned how to give hand massages, or you're learning the techniques of hand massages and probably the ergonomics of the human hand and so on.
More so the ergonomics. I would say that
ergonomics,
exercises,
anatomy of the mechanics of the human hand. Let me use that
basically just
term.
being more limber with my fingers.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you're learning this based, and you're probably learning new things and new techniques and so on.
Oh yeah.
This. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And
sure.
how you're learning that, you're using your long-term memory as a point of reference on how to massage a hand, or what you already know about the hand.
Okay, yeah.
And so on. And so your mind requires part of its processing power of those 200 trillion data points. It's going to use like 70 trillion of those to go and get those memories of motor function and bring them into the current learning session.
Yeah.
And then make points of reference so that you can learn that quicker. But if you were younger or didn't have any interest in anatomy or any of that and didn't know anything about the human hand, it would take you a lot longer to learn that new thing, that new hand massage technique, right?
Yeah.
It would take you longer because you didn't know anything about the hand. But if you bring something to the table and you already know something about the hand, it's going to recall those memories, bring it to the forefront so you can learn it faster and better. So
the only thing I see are like little microscopic robots just going through files, and then you're like 70 trillion, you go there.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, you're the orchestrator of your little minions, your little robot, That's how I see it. Well, the way you describe it, I'm such a visual person as an artist.
That's the way I think about it too.
The way I actually retain that knowledge is by imagining those things. And then I'm like, and then I'll recall it back.
What you just said is one of the leading practices for memory retention,
really?
Which is absolutely
well,
yes.
Good old instincts.
Some of the competitive leaders of the world in memory games. So they have these memory games on how much information can you memorize and just regurgitate in a certain period of time.
The kind of games like that is when you do alla prima painting. You literally have to have someone sit there and you paint them live, but they're human and they move around and you only have so much time. So you're basically trying to memorize someone's face and then just put it on paper and only have to look up for so long in order to already get it on there. And then when they leave, you can still try and finish it if you haven't, which is the harder.
Alla prima. Is that an intentional where they leave and come back so that you have that?
Alla prima, I'm sorry. Alla prima just means all in one shot. So it just means you start to finish painting in one sitting. I
used to do this in college. I was a nude model for I was a nude model.
If there's a nude in the classified, sign me up with your Daisy Duke shorts and your nude paintings.
First of all, they paid me $75 an hour.
Hey, I'd do it, baby.
In college. And
that top ramen life.
I was interested in art, and I had sat through some of the art classes, and some of the chicks in the classes were hot.
I mean, I was wondering.
And I was looking for any reason to take my shirt off in front of these girls back then, especially.
Did you have to go like fully nude?
No, I wore these really tiny trunks.
Oh, you must love that.
I did, but here's the thing. Oh, wow. That's awesome to see the window.
There's a lot going on right out the window.
But I would wear my my little undies and they would draw. But the reason the art teacher kept bringing me back is I had been out of the military maybe 8 months at this point, and all my limbs could go to sleep and I could be in so much pain and I wouldn't move. And that's why he loved having me sit, is because I could sit in a position longer than anybody that he had ever seen before.
Oh, that's definitely a must in a model.
I was proud about that, actually. I was really proud about it because my limbs would go to sleep and I'd be in serious pain and I'd still hold it for another hour or two.
I mean, I don't know how long it's been since you've been out. I'm sure much longer than 8 months, but you sit really well for tattoos. So I imagine that it still works out for you.
Mind over matter is where that is.
That's where it goes.
Long story short, so I was a nude model and I had some fun doing that, and I took pride in being able to sit really long so that they didn't have to. I appreciated it because I was also an artist in those classes, and it was really annoying whenever the person would move. But it makes you memorize that in short-term spouts, right? But if you bring to the table some knowledge and experience of alla prima painting, you can probably make up the missing bits after they move. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's, by doing that, I think that's actually what's made me so good with faces. I can pretty much, I'm really, really good at looking at people's faces and matching it with like maybe someone else that I've seen before in movies, like an actor or a musician or something. Or when people look like each other, I will always notice like jaw lines and the way eyes sit and things like that. I don't know why. I'm always really good with faces.
You do that when we look at Dave's artwork too. You see faces, like
all the
large
time,
faces as well.
I guess that's where my head's always at.
Right.
I do love portraits.
Yeah. So back to the memory thing, I think if it's cool to continue to talk about this, I find it to be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm cool with it.
So I think the interesting part about what I was getting at in the learning piece, the learning something new. So circling back to the learning something new in a hand massage, is you're able to pull in elements of experience into the current millisecond and second of processing something new. And this is what I think is so cool, is that the more experience, it's like a full circle thing. We're trying to learn all the time and grow and learn all the time. Improve our skill sets, broaden our capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. But what we're doing is creating files in our mind every time we do that as a reference point to bring into the forefront when we're learning the next new thing. And one would think, just generally speaking, you're going to run out of memory.
Really? No way.
And it makes me wonder sometimes if we would benefit by filing less things away.
Oh man, that is things we talk about all the time. The way I think about it is if I didn't have to file away all those thoughts, and then I go a little deeper, and I think we spoke about this in last week's episode, is what thoughts serve me, what thoughts don't, and I am not my thoughts. So those are the things that I think about. Now, I don't have to file all the thoughts away. Which thoughts can I just, And I believe that you have the capacity and the brain power and the will, if you have the will, to choose what you can keep and what you can't. And I fucking love that shit. Like, that is what I like to study, is what thoughts I personally, because if I think about everybody else, I think it's overwhelming. But if I can practice it on myself and see the improvement and the growth from that, and filing less away, make me less stress, would maybe give my memory more capacity to remember certain things or actual details of certain things. I don't know. I think it'd be great. So what if we could do that?
Are you talking about thought control?
Yes. A bit. Not, I wouldn't say thought control. I would say.
What would you call it? Thought management.
Thought management would be better.
Because and memory management. Thought to memory, translating thoughts and situations and experiences to memory, and controlling what you file away and how much of that you decide to file away. I wonder if that's a thing.
Well, the way I think of it is that you can't necessarily control what goes on, like what thoughts you have, but you can choose which ones serve you and which ones don't. And if the ones that don't serve you, you're still going to have them. You might have a memory of that thought because it creates a feeling, and that feeling, whether it be painful or awesome, you remember the feeling. You might not remember the thought that gave you that feeling, but you remember that feeling, unless that circumstance that created the thought and the feeling was so much that you'll always remember it. So you attribute it to that story.
Yeah, a trauma, if you will.
So I think that if you can change, and this is how I think you can change your past, is because you can take the circumstance of your past and make it completely neutral. You don't put a feeling behind it, or the habitual feeling that you put behind it, but you take it, you change it, and you're like, what thought can I think that I can believe for this circumstance that will make me not less angry or whatever, if it's a negative thought especially. So I find that pretty fascinating. And I think you can do that with your brain power.
That's really fascinating. It sounds complicated and
it's
challenging.
Not, I think I'm explaining it weirdly, but
no, I think you're doing an excellent job at explaining it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around my tiny little brain about how in the heck I can put that into practice, because it sounds awesome. Yeah, it sounds
It is really awesome. I've been practicing for a long time, and I still don't get it, but I see it. I feel it coming closer and closer. And I think you spoke about this in our very first episode, actually, where you were like, I can't wait to be that person over there that's awesome and understands and is a little bit more wiser on this, certain things in your life that you're transitioning through, and self-growth journey and that kind of thing. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about exploring thought management for sure.
Oh, for sure.
And translating my thoughts, or managing my thoughts and somehow translating them into something more productive. I tend to be a pretty positive person most of the time.
Yeah.
But
I think we all are. I think we, you know what I mean? I don't think that that's not I
try to be positive.
I don't equate it to really positive or negative. I think it's just more like, how can we just be at peace with it?
Yeah.
Because there's some things in your past that you're just like, how, you know what I mean? And so it's maybe circumstances, whatever happens in your life, that people are just like, well, what about this, and this, Reese? Or what about this, and this situation? And there's a moment in there where you're like, I can't tell you just to, hey, be positive. Hey, just how can you find peace with it? Like, how do you let go in that sense? And what thought would help you do that? What other thought might create that for you?
So in practice, what you're saying is we want to manage the current situation or our feelings and emotions in such a way that processes it to find positive outcome and positive avenues, channels, however you want to look at it, leveraging our past experience to do so. And even if it's traumatic or negative or what have you, we bring that into the forefront with a neutral feeling, if possible, as much as possible. Leverage that as a lesson on how to cope with or manage the current experience. And that's for everything that's happening. And I think what you're saying is spot on to the way that the mind processes things, as I was describing it before. Exactly. You have a new situation that needs to be managed. And the first thing the mind does is it recalls its long-term memory to say, this is how I managed it last time. This is how I know that this was the outcome, consequences, et cetera, et cetera. And now here I am again in something similar. Let me look at what's happened, and then also take some current variables into play, all these other new variables in the equation and apply that to what's next and how I want to react and behave.
Before, I love that, by the way. I think where you have the circumstance, it doesn't have to be similar circumstance. It just gives you a similar feeling. So it gives you a similar feeling from a past circumstance.
Fair.
So, because like, I wouldn't say that you go through a traumatic experience and you're going through it again, the same similar circumstance, but it does, maybe something that you're going through now today stems a feeling that you've had a, past history with, that maybe another circumstance has happened. So I think that yes, you're definitely
by definition, they're not the same circumstances and maybe not the same situation, but what I'm referring to is it's the same experience, whether it be circumstantial, whether it be a feeling, whether it be an emotion, whether it be, an accident that happened to you. But the experience itself, to your point, a feeling, you've felt something similar to whatever, love, or hurt in some way, but in a entirely different circumstance and situation. You can leverage that on a couple of ways. And that's how the mind
is amazing
and the body works. And what you're talking about is thought management that allows you to morph or translate, if you will, this new learning and ebb and flow with that. So what your mind is doing, it's taking these 200 trillion processing capability per second. It's using part of that to capture all these past feelings and experiences, bringing that into the forefront. And then you have this other bit of processing capacity to help you do what it is that you're doing. So maybe now in Reese's mind, you're using a third of that percentage to process all the things you just talked us through.
Oh my God.
And then, but right?
Like you're just thinking about all the things we just processed, that we filed, that we're retaining, that we are, all the things in your mind that goes on literally in this conversation is blowing my mind. Like, I
hope that it blows a million people's minds someday.
I think I'm talking backwards at this point.
No, but it makes sense because the mind is quite organic and beautiful in that way, and it can keep up with just about everything.
Absolutely.
As long as you're smiling and you're keeping a positive face on, and you know how to, and I say smiling and keep it a positive face because that technically by definition releases different chemicals in the brain and changes the way that we process things. And if we find through habit, research, and data points that, if we're frowning or every time we cross something new and we don't like change and that makes us feel sad or anxiety or stress, try and use the Reese method, which is see the positive, find a way to leverage your past experience and feelings and emotions to see something that maybe in the past, whenever this was a negative thing, it didn't work out so well for me. Right? That didn't feel good.
Right.
So let's try something new here and be open to that and use our processing capacity in our mind. If we look at it like a computing thing, I would much rather use the capacity in my mind to figure out a cool way to get out of a situation or get into a situation than feel like a total Debbie Downer about the situation, because the anxiety and the stress that is created through chemical generation in the mind that comes with the stress of approaching a new learning or something new will kill your ability to even process and find a successful outcome for your own self and the people around you.
Because you're not open to the possibility.
This and what we've just talked through is what drives us as humans, and your brother in test taking, right? And art. All of this stuff and the way that we process things, these good juices going on in the mind is really the way to go. If you can find a way to make really shitty things cool or make a really shitty situation something that's positive, right?
Totally. Like not liking test taking.
Yeah. That is, well, if you have to test take, right? Learn to love it.
Learn to love it.
Learn to love it, and you will succeed and be good at it. The interesting thing is, because you're learning to love it, you're automatically going to be better at it.
Oh, yeah.
If you can leverage a passion where talent exists within you and in the way that your mind works, and put all that, 200 trillion elements of horsepower in the direction of that passion. Maybe it's creative art for you. Maybe it's business design for me. That's when you've really, I think, gotten a stronghold on the essence of how you can impact the world. I mean that because...
No, I believe you. I totally believe you. Believe you. Because when you're that aware and you're that in tuned with yourself, and you have that high self-awareness, with your mind, I mean, honestly, those are like the people I look up to, like
those
Eckhart
are leaders.
Tolle, like all these huge, just like how they've really mastered their own mind and their own just everything.
Those are real thought leaders. And I think that those folks that they call thought leaders, maybe they're not traditional scientists. Maybe they're not, their methods are very similar to those greats of the past, Gandhi and psychologists and thought leaders of the past, philosophers and so on. We're not creating something new every year. We're just expanding the reach to data and information and leveraging many, many, many data points on thought and processing thought. And now, more than ever, we are presented with more data and more distractions and more disruptions in a day than ever before.
Oh, absolutely.
Which has an effect on the human mind. It allows us to fire on a lot of cylinders in a lot of different directions, which I'm trying to figure out how healthy this is and how to channel that and eliminate those variables if needed, or prioritize the variables that I allow into my day.
I understand. I also think that from maybe another perspective is that, yeah, we have a lot of distractions. And yes, it is causing our minds to fire off on all cylinders. But since it has opened our minds, you see the younger generation from us smarter than ever. I'm seeing 16-year-old millionaires, entrepreneurs, you know what I mean? Because
that's about access, not about smarts.
Well, I also feel like that I understand the access of it, but that the fact that we can almost, like, our problem solving skills, I feel like have gotten better as well.
Access to data. It's faster access to data.
That's true. But who is the one creating the data?
We are.
That's what I'm saying.
And data warehouses, Google, Yahoo.
Right. But how do we expand from to Google to the computers and all these things? Like, I mean, our minds are expanding. I feel as though that's
coming
maybe helpful.
From, totally. I think it's helpful in a sense.
Well, and just one sec. I would say also helpful in having that self-awareness, how important we're realizing how it is to have self-awareness and to be really on top of our minds and on our bodies, especially with all of the distraction. How much better are we getting at it?
Yeah.
You know?
It's a good point. I see it as, and I don't mean to be...
I get it. I know.
My mind sees it as a benefit, and it's beautiful, actually. You have a seamless access to every bit of information pretty much ever known now at the flip,
fingertips,
the opening of an app, and now our memories, our own personal memories and the data that we put into our head and our own scientific exploration of that information and that data, where we choose to spend our time, like scientific exploration, I'll translate that to art in your case, right? Art school and, colors and, design and so on. And for me, it's, gosh, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Business, let's just leave it as simple as that.
Yeah.
Business and strategy and processing things like what we're talking about, building processes and self-growth.
We're literally describing your brain right now.
Rigor in design. Yeah, rigor of design and vision, making visions become things.
Sure.
But that's a creative process that we're reflecting on these past experiences and the data that we absorb through school or Google and all of these things. So now you can build a business from your passion in a couple months, when in the past it would take you years to get where one can get in a month or two now.
Oh my gosh, it's insane.
They can build things through design now overnight when it used to take generations, simply due to the access to algorithms and computing processes.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's beautiful. And it's dangerous.
Yeah, I feel you on both accounts for sure.
And so back to what we were talking about, though, I think that all of that data and all of the information floating out there and our access to all this stuff is multitasking for the brain all the time.
Is that even real? Is multitasking even real?
No, I don't think it is.
Think it is.
You have this mind, and it can do multiple things and bring back, like we've been discussing. But yes, it's constantly processing things to get to a conclusion, like troubleshooting and filing things away at the same time every second. But how we feel affects how we process. That's what blows my mind, and what I think is super critical for us to pay attention to. Just be happy. Don't worry. Be happy.
I agree. I'm 100% there with you on that. We can go on and on about the mind, and
Dave's going to sleep.
But I totally agree, and I think we should all really focus on all of that. And really, maybe just the fact that we're here now talking about it, hopefully it helps people think about it.
Yeah, I think about it all the time.
I know.
And so all that said, in conclusion, I would say, hell, I don't know that there is a conclusion. That was an interesting journey on the mind that I was not expecting.
I mean, we always go so many different avenues, but it's like octopus tentacles. It always has the foundation, head. Right? The head. It has the head.
Somehow we make it back to the start, don't we?
Yeah.
Whoa. All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Night.